encourage more trades, which puts more money in your pocket, not helping people build equity through smarter investing. So I would ask you, Mr. Tenov, I'd ask two things. Who exactly do you believe you're democratizing finance for, and how do you plan to address these conflicts of interest?
And first of all, I believe in our business model, Congresswoman. I believe our business model has become the industry standard for a reason. It's because it's good for customers. It's led to the democratization of the markets.
Wow.
And we're very proud.
Good afternoon. Glad you can join us. Our internet seems pretty good today, so hopefully we'll stay on. I'm watching the GameStop hearings right now, and there's, I would say, of the, 15, 20 different legislators that have asked questions, maybe 4 actually understand what they're asking. I think there's talking points and nonsense. Somebody just asked about income inequality. It's just, you have legislators trying to make points to their constituents without truly understanding how markets work, how trades work, how trades are go from the click of one's keyboard to actual execution, what capital is required. If you remember back when DraftKings, this happened. So DraftKings was a stock that really had no right being a very expensive stock. It was around $10, but one investor wrote actually a very good paper a while back saying that he argued that it was worth up to about $50. It wasn't a terrible company, but long-term it may not be a great company. There was one huge hedge fund that had a huge short interest, which is basically betting the stock to go down. And on Reddit, which is an online chat room, many thousands, tens of thousands of different investors talked about this, read this document, and decided to buy a bunch of the stock, and it forced the shorts to get out. They lost a fortune, and many what we call retail investors. And when we say retail investors, we're talking about people like me, as opposed to institutional investors, which are like JP Morgan. So the retail investors, for the first time, really had significant power, because retail investors, if I buy a share of stock, I'm buying, 50 shares, 100 shares, a couple hundred shares, in that ballpark. When JP Morgan buys it, when a hedge fund buys it, they're buying tens of thousands of shares. We saw this week that Warren Buffett has, hundreds of millions of dollars in Apple and hundreds of millions of dollars in other stocks, and the retail investors can't compete with that. But when they all band together, as they did on social media, which is completely legal, they can compete and they can move markets. When you go after a stock like GameStop, which isn't exactly the definition of a low float stock, but where you would have, a billion shares of Amazon out there, maybe there's only 10 million shares of GameStop, just using numbers for an example there. So if you buy 1 million shares of GameStop, you can move the market. In any event, this happened, and as soon as it happened afterwards, people like AOC and even Ted Cruz came out with this. We need to get to the bottom of this. This is terrible. How is this happening? And when it happened, Robinhood had a credit crunch where they had like 10 times the amount of volume on their system. They had to come up with money to secure these trades. And so they limited trades in GameStop. So what happened was you had all these traders pushing the price of GameStop up and more traders wanting to come in. And it would have looked like Robinhood said was, okay, you can't buy GameStop anymore, which helped the institutional traders, helped the big hedge funds to get out. They were able to buy and sell, but the Robinhood, the retail investors, weren't as much. And so the political argument was, oh my God, this Robinhood organization, these traders all helped the hedge funds and didn't help the small guy. In actuality, that's not what was happening. When you buy and sell a stock and you click a button, the order is filled, but it's not technically filled on the back end. It can take a day or two for that to happen. And so the company doing the trade, like Robinhood, has to put up capital. They have to make sure money's on hand to cover these trades. When you are trading, as like me or you, if you join Robinhood or TD Ameritrade or E-Trade or whatever, you can put, say, $10,000, and they actually allow you to trade with about $30,000 or $40,000. That's called margin. So you had suddenly this huge rush of retail investors. And the numbers that he said during the hearing was almost 10 times as much in retail trading that day, which put pressure on that money that he had to have saved in as collateral, essentially. There was a call for $3 billion that morning, and so they got nervous and limited trading. That's what happened. That's what's supposed to happen. There's nothing earth-shattering about that. That's normal. But at the end of the day, oh, shoot. Can I again with this? No, why am I getting... Okay, am I live? Or am I just talking to myself? For some reason, comments aren't coming through, so I'm not sure what the story is there. In any event, somebody just confirmed. Okay, we're hearing you. Thanks, Mary. So we get to this hearing. So as soon as all of that happened, we have people on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, all jumping in and saying, hold on a second, this is terrible, this is awful, we need to fix this problem. The truth of the matter is you don't need to fix the problem. The market fixes itself. So yes, this was something that came up and was pretty amazing. I mean, it was unbelievable to watch. We watched some of it live. I talked through it as those trades were happening. And soon, just after those trading days. Remember, you can trade pre-market and post-market. But what actually happened was all these retail investors moved this market, and they're unlikely to be able to do that again. And the reason they're unlikely to be able to do that again is because as soon as that happened, every single hedge fund, every single large bank, every single large institutional financial company that trades is going to start likely what's called a social media division. And they will have kids on every single chat room seeing what's being talked about. They'll have algorithms looking for stock codes and seeing what's being brought up, and they will get ahead of this before it happens again. They kind of want it to happen. They would make money in that circumstance, but there'll be enough hedge funds in there watching this stuff that likely won't happen again. You need a very specific set of circumstances to take place for that to happen. And so the market eventually takes care of itself. The good thing about this was that it opened the door to a lot of new investors. And part of things is just that we have perfect storms altogether, right? So COVID happened, so you had people home. If people had money, or if they didn't, they were getting unemployment money. They may have been getting stimulus money. So younger people, younger retail investors, even adults who said, I need to find other ways to make money, started saying, okay, let me throw $5,000 in the market, see what happens. Learn to day trade. You can go on YouTube and take basic lessons on day trading. Learn how to swing trade. Learn how to read a profit report, a PE report. These are all things I advocate for. And so bringing in all those new investors is a good thing. It's something we should be seeing more people get involved and be interested. Now, will that continue? It's unlikely as we get back to work, COVID reopens, people get back to school and jobs. But it's a good thing when people start asking questions on how things work, why things work, and understand the financial markets. And if they are hopefully learning the market and making smarter trades, looking more long-term, it's a good thing overall for all of us involved to really open up the financial industry and start saving money at a young age, start investing at a young age, buy stock at a young age. If you have young kids, set up an account and buy Disney for them, buy Amazon, buy Walmart, buy the stores that you go to, teach them about basic business. Will Walmart go up or down? What happens when a stimulus comes out? What companies are being effective by COVID in a positive or negative way? As the country reopens, what companies will do better? So let's think about that for a second. When COVID came, what companies did great? Clorox, right? It doesn't take a genius to understand why. But if you suddenly realize that we had to clean up things like crazy, we had to bleach things like crazy and wipe everything down like crazy, you could have said last March, you know what? I should buy Clorox. Now that the country may reopen, it's not crazy for the average person to say, you know what? People might start going to movies again. They might go, out more often. They might go out to eat again. Can you buy stocks in food in restaurants like Chili's? Can you buy stocks in movie theaters like AMC or Cinemark? These are common, interesting questions that we have to start asking ourselves and teach kids at a young age to start asking, because that's going to impact the market. And we can make smart decisions and invest in our future by getting answers to those questions. So a very interesting day, and you're watching all these representatives get 5 minutes to go on and on and on. And they're talking about income inequality, and they're talking about concepts they clearly have no idea. And then you get 2 or 3 that really do, and you're like, wow, this is great. This is amazing. But these are what, political hearings are. And it's crazy to have to listen to. So that being said, we got some interesting numbers today. And from a political standpoint, we go to where politics and finance kind of comes together. And the new jobless claims, I want to get the exact numbers here so we can read them, were expected to be 773,000. However, they were 861,000. What is that telling us? Is that while the country may be reopening and more things are going to be open soon, it's not necessarily creating more jobs yet. Many people, those are some of the new jobless claims. Many people are still out of work. Many people do not have the money they had coming in before. So even in COVID, some people had jobs for a temporary amount of time and are losing jobs now. Those are new jobless claims. First-time filings for unemployment, 861,000. So while the market's doing fine, from a job standpoint, and the need for the stimulus is actually increasing as more and more people file for unemployment. And I'm not seeing a lot of, even the restaurants and the businesses that I'm seeing, no hiring is taking place. There's interviews taking place. There's large companies going through the interview process, but a lot of companies are still holding off on hiring. And that includes even, stories I'm hearing from Yale where the people are going through the interview process, moving on, but aren't getting hired, aren't getting offered jobs. Large institutions are going through that process. So we may have in, 3 or 4 months, 5, 6 months, whatever it is, a massive hiring jump. But it doesn't seem like companies are doing that now. And so that brings us to the topic we have talked about nonstop for the last, year or so, and that's the next stimulus. And it is amazing to me that we're having this hearing. You know what? Here is somebody who knows what she's talking about. Every time Janet Yellen is on, she was the former chair of the Fed. She's now in a different position in the government. Biden put her in. But every time she's on, she's logical and reasonable. And after all these hearings, she's on CNBC right now talking about we need bipartisan support for a stimulus. We need it to pass now. And we see this in this unemployment numbers. And we can see, if you get nothing from this podcast or my history of podcasts, is start understanding where politics and economics converge. Because you cannot fully understand one without understanding the other. We have politicians with these long nonsense speeches about income inequality and all this nonsense happening, and that's great. And it has its place. And much of it I agree with. What we need is action. And, Biden promised $2,000. Why we're waiting to, CNBC is reporting here, and I'll read this to you. Let's see here. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are working on a new coronavirus relief bill expected to include new direct payments of $1,400. Legislation is currently on pace to be finalized in early to mid-March, at which the point the government would start deploying the money. Why mid-March? It's February 28th, February 18th. Biden's been in office for almost a month. What the hell's taking so long? Pass the bill. And I always wonder what in the world, when they want to act, they can act. And when they just take their sweet time, as these numbers get worse and worse and worse, as the people who are getting their vaccine is not increasing nearly as fast as it should be. There's a shortage in many areas of vaccines. Why is this not passed? And this is where, instead of passing a stimulus, and granted, 2 things can happen at the same time. We're having ridiculous hearings. We've had Janet Yellen. We've had the current head of the Fed call for this over and over and over again to push the stimulus package, and it's just not happening. An interesting thing today, too, when we start talking about issues that matter, Steve, I don't disagree with you. I don't call it a sham impeachment. I just call it an unnecessary impeachment. I don't know. Nothing was gained by that. But I'm going to pull up a quote here. Give me 1 second. Because Walmart came out with pretty bad a forecast. Now, Walmart is actually one of the best indicators of an economy because, even every class goes to Walmart, but especially the lower middle classes go to Walmart. And Walmart shares dropped nearly 6% after its fourth quarter earnings fell short of Wall Street estimates. The big box retailer also sees growth slowing this year as the pandemic momentum ebbs. So from a purchasing ability, Americans are buying less. They've spent over the last year a fortune on their homes. They even put some money in the market, possibly. They shopped quite a bit. They are now tired of spending money or don't have any money left to spend. And the stimulus still sits there waiting. This doesn't make any sense. On top of that, you're going to see the market start dropping a little as people take, you had this spectacular run for the last year. Since March 18th or so of last year, the worst day, stocks have gone insane. If you invested anything, if you had any money saved, you did well. People are going to start taking money off the table. And that's going to be, I think, a common theme. In my opinion, a dip is coming. How much of a dip, I'm not sure. But it's likely coming, in my opinion, fairly soon. Okay, I want to get to something I mentioned the other day that we got an email about what's going on potentially in the Costco property. So there has been discussed. The Costco property is owned by Wayne Cook. It's up off Exit 56. And if you remember, Costco withdrew their application. They were approved in planning and zoning, but they withdrew before inland wetlands can get to their decision. I don't know how they would have gone. There were some issues there, but they withdrew it. So the town never denied Costco. So despite all the crap you're seeing in the emails and the stuff printed and all that nonsense, the town of Brantford never denied Costco. However, there's been discussions. It's fairly well known. It's all over town that there's potentially not delivery, like a warehouse delivery system being proposed up there. There have been people going around town trying to get information or what have you. So that may sell, what have you. But here's the thing that's interesting about this whole situation. Let's suppose the word I was looking for was distribution center. And that is, we don't know if it's Amazon or whatever, but in that vein. The town and the Stony Creekers fought Costco, which was a very, very good project and a good plan, under this guise of traffic and environmental stuff, and it was nonsense. It was a lot of dishonesty, a lot of crap. I listened over and over as their presentations were just made up. You had groups of people who refused to come to the table or talk about it at all. It was crazy. It was absurd. And that plan was what was called a PDD, a Planned Development District. And it took 7-8 properties, put it together, created a cohesive plan to develop the site, added a new access road to 95, and from a neighborhood standpoint, from a town standpoint, from a tax revenue standpoint, was a great, great project. It made a ton of sense. It minimized traffic by making sure traffic from those spots didn't go to Route 1, instead went to it limited the curb cuts that have to go, all the different stops and starts you would have for the different businesses. It created an internal road to eliminate or to minimize traffic on the main roads. If you are a resident with a clear head and logic, you were for that project because you knew potentially something else can come that wouldn't put nearly the money in that Costco would, that wouldn't create the roads, wouldn't have done all those things. And so you had this group of Democrats, and let's face facts. It's a group of Democrats from Stony Creek that were fighting Wayne Cook because he had gone to battle with Hunter Ross. We get it. And no one here has love for Wayne Cook. But in this case, that project made sense. It was the best use of the property. Overall, the town wanted it. Thousands of people signed petitions for it. And you had a small group of people who lied and made stuff up and created as difficult a path as they possibly could. Now, why Costco is not here isn't necessarily because of that. It's part of it. But the overall rising costs that came with adjusting because of the land trust and adjusting because of the state and all these complaints. And some of those issues with the state came from certain connected people on a town level calling the state and pushing some of that pressure. In any event, what you'll end up with instead is a warehouse. And that warehouse is likely not going to pay for that access road that connected to East Industrial Road into 95. So the warehouse is going to have traffic that will call in, maybe trucks that'll come out to Route 1 instead, use the main roads instead, potentially create more traffic instead of a project that was vastly superior because a few members of Stony Creek, a political party that were fighting things for no apparent reason other than political, fought like crazy. You could have had a 10 times better plan. You could have had Costco by now. You could have had hundreds of thousands in tax revenue coming in because of it. It would have been right on a highway. And instead, we said, well, we fought it. Now, there's a million things that would have had to happen after it left the town on approval from a state standpoint, internally with Costco. There were some changes at Costco, all that kind of stuff. So maybe never happens. But this is where morons who have political influence can impact the best interests of a town. And we're seeing this in other areas as well. We're seeing this in our meetings that are people that don't understand what they're talking about. We had a Democratic representative of the RTM calling for a study on development on the Tabor property. Nobody wants development on the Tabor property. Shut up. Leave it alone. But these are people who can't keep their mouth shut and run their political agenda that ruins the town. Let Jamie do what he's doing. Let Jim Finch do what he's doing. Let Joe Mooney do what he's doing. They're doing a good job. And we saw this with Costco. We're going to get an application relatively soon, I'm sure, for a warehouse distribution center to go on that site instead of a Costco. The distribution center will pay a minimum amount in taxes. They won't do anywhere near the road improvements Costco was going to do. They aren't taking a bunch of properties and making one cohesive development. Instead, we'll get a goddamn warehouse. This is where stupid people will influence hurt the town, hurt the rest. And in general, there were wealthy people from Stony Creek that signed papers and had no problem hiring an attorney. That attorney was the worst attorney I've ever seen. He had no problem making shit up. It was a far left whack job. And he came into these hearings and he just made stuff up. Literally, he was wrong on the square footage. He was wrong on the impacts. He was wrong on, it was crazy. They had an expert who was probably, I would call him a flower child. He was just this like crazy rambling nonsense. And even the Inland Wetlands Commission, who are generally left-leaning, were rolling their eyes at this guy. It was just a waste of time instead of helping bring a very good asset to Brantford. And we'll pay the price by, at some point something has to go there. And if it is Amazon or some other distribution center planning on going there, they'll apply and probably get approved, because at some point you can't keep denying something or fighting something on the same property. And it just goes to show when political bullshit gets in the way, bad things happen. On this hearing with GameStop, there's going to be a push by some for more regulations, especially for day traders or for capital requirements or what have you. And when that happens, bad things happen. More regulations would mean fewer people have an open door to get into the market. And this is a common theme that we're seeing. Regulations are fine when they make sense, when they protect us. They're not fine when they're politically motivated. Fighting projects that make sense sounds good. You fought the good fight. I mean, I was in the meeting in Stony Creek at the Stony Creek Association where they were like, we're going to fight this. And they were high-fiving themselves. And this is going to be great. We can all get together and it could be a social event. They were fighting it for fun. In the meantime, by now, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in tax revenue the town could have used is gone. Oh, and by the way, Costco stock is doubled in the last 2.5, 3 years. I own Costco stock at 150. It's like 300 now, over 300 now. So all this stuff about, oh, retail's dying and no one's shopping at Costco anymore, no, complete bullshit, completely made up, completely wrong. And that's what we heard in hearing after hearing after hearing. And now our town doesn't have an asset, bring our tax revenue, a shopping asset for people who either has to go to East Lyme or Milford to go to Costco. You're helping the environment. People are driving further. It's crazy. And the question I always come up with is, so what are the obligations? Are the people who are the loudest in the room often the biggest pain in the asses? And the rest of us stay home. And you go to these hearings, and all you have are the people spreading false information, misinformation, fear, and nonsense. I did an article back in those 2 or 3 years ago where I took the leaders of a group called the BCRD, who was going to destroy our town and our neighborhood, and I showed where they lived, and not their actual addresses, but the miles, and they were all like 3 miles away. Like no one lived close to Costco. It was a political game they were playing. And so we pay the price. Lorena would look so good at exit 51, Home Depot in East Haven. Lane contaminated with oil. We need the tax revenue. Well, everybody wants tax revenue. There was a lot of misinformation that Costco was coming with multiple chain restaurants like Red Robin's. I don't think any of that was true. Okay, here's what was true. It wasn't just Costco. There was other lots as well. There were no other guaranteed tenants for those lots. So what happens when you have a PDD is instead of saying, let's develop this one square, we say, let's take 7 or 8 squares or properties. They're not all square, but properties, and put them together and create a cohesive plan. A good example of this is like on Branford Hill, where we have a bunch of little strip malls, but all the parking lots connect. That's helpful, right? So if people are going from the dollar store to Five Guys, I think I have it right, you can do so without having to go back to Route 1. It creates a cohesive plan. In the Costco PDD, which does this, takes all these properties and puts them as one group, they were creating a road in the middle of it, which would allow people going from Costco to another property, to another store, to do so without going back out into the main roads, and therefore decrease traffic on the main roads. It was smart, but it was expensive. You needed somebody like Costco to do it because most companies are not going to do that. Costco didn't mind spending that kind of money. So what was going to go there? It could have been a Red Robin, who knows? But when you had no definitive answer, it was just going to be a lot. There was no tenant yet. It allowed the crazies to make the claim that you're going to have a Taco Bell, a Red Robin, and a Red Lobster, or whatever it was. We don't know what was going to go there. There was going to be more retail space there. And what we're finding in the retail space is some places don't make it, and some places do great. Places that tend to be inexperienced do well. Panera Bread, for example. If Costco was there, I would bet Panera Bread would be there as well. I think Panera Bread would rather have gone there than Guilford. But these are the things that morons who think they're helping the town, and they still congratulate themselves. They fought the good fight. Our town is not better off for that fight. But they don't care. A lot of them are wealthy, don't give a damn. Doesn't impact them. The higher taxes they don't care about. And so we could have had that here. We don't because of idiots. And the discussion in Washington, more regulations on trading, more regulations on Robinhood, where all the retail investors are, the average, I'm not there, by the way, but a lot of retail investors are, will only hurt the little guy. Let's think twice before we fight good projects or before we add more regulations to something that will impact retail investors, the average person trying to invest some money and save. Okay, that's 4:30. Went a little long. Sorry about that, but I hope everybody enjoyed their snow. I have to go out and actually shovel a little bit, so I need to make sure my walkway and car are free for tomorrow. And I hope you all have a great night. I hope you all binge watch something amazing on Monday. We'll be back, and I will see you then. I hope you all have a great night.